Your Excellency, Ambassador Michael Raynor, Ambassador of the United States of America to the Democratic Republic of Ethiopia. Dear Honorable Ambassador, I write to you as a fellow citizen and a concerned humanitarian. I write with grave concern and trepidation regarding the situation in my birthland, Ethiopia. I ask that you use all available tools at your disposal to address the increasingly worrisome political, security, and humanitarian crisis. Mass imprisonment, torture, mass atrocities, extrajudicial killings by the TPLF government. These are crimes against humanity. And I say with a heavy heart that the situation will get worse if we do not come to a solution as soon as possible. I write to you, sir, because you represent the most powerful, most righteous nation in the face of the earth, my country, the United States. Your Excellency, I'm an Ethiopian American, a living witness to the declaration, America, the land of the free. This is especially true for me because I'm not an economic refugee. I left the country I love deeply to spare my life from the bullets of the communist government that took power in the 1970s. Friendly, warm, and kind Americans took me in at the tender age of 17 and helped me become the man I am today. I have called America my country for the last 40 years, and the American people, one of the kindest, most compassionate people on earth, as my people. At the same time, I have deep, eternal love for my beloved country, Ethiopia, and for its people. That is why I become indignant when I see my government exercise opportunistic foreign policy that puts political expediency ahead of steadfast and moral principles. Thus, this letter to you. Mr. Ambassador, in recent days, the United States has made it plenty clear that it opposes the state of emergency declared by the TPLF government. This brutal military rule that has been imposed on the Ethiopian people. These political pronouncements are great. However, if they are not followed by action, they are of no value. By action, I mean to say that the US must impose diplomatic, economic, military, and intelligence sanctions to bring about meaningful change. Your Excellency, it is a national disgrace for the United States to partner with a regime characterized by every human rights organization in the world as the most brutal, repressive regime, on the same level as North Korea. In making these pronouncements, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, Genocide Watch, Committee to Protect Journalists, and even the US State Department have documented and amply substantiated abominable acts by the TPLF-led ethnic dictatorship ruling over Ethiopia. Some of the atrocities committed by the TPLF regime against political prisoners and journalists are too horrific to mention in a public letter. Even the sanitized report of what goes on in the regime's prisons and underground dungeons that make their way to the State Department through the US Embassy are impossible to imagine. What's happening in TPLF prisons would shock even the demons from hell and make them blush with modesty. Opposition leaders, journalists, and other political prisoners have testified as to the shocking details, including in court, in front of foreign observers, and reported that they have been castrated. That is to say, a number of prisoners have taken their pants off in court and shown their mutilated genitals to the judge as proof of the inhumane travail they have suffered. Surely, the US Embassy is aware of this fact. Mr. Ambassador, one of the most heinous torture tools that the TPLF regime employs is that of dehumanizing the victim and his family. Many political prisoners have been taken to torture chambers and asked to admit to a crime that they have not committed. These people have been emotionally extorted and blackmailed in their darkest hours. Moreover, when they refused to do so, the prisoner's spouse was routinely brought into jail, and the prisoner told that his wife will be gang raped in front of his own eyes if he doesn't confess. In one of the country reports that the State Department published, a report that made its way to the State Department through the US Embassy that you are now in charge of, it outlines horrific techniques at the Mahakalawi prison, including but not limited to being whipped with wire and beaten on the head and the inside of the feet, being gagged, hung upside down, and beaten with electric cord, being threatened with injection by HIV-infected blood. Only God knows how many prisoners were actually injected with HIV-infected blood, because the TPLF does not make empty threats. Your Excellency, do you smell the thickness of the spilled blood of my people in the air? The Ethiopian air is rife with the stench of the blood of innocent people. Do you hear the blood-curdling screams of the prisoners being tortured for no good reason? Do you hear the agony of good men having their manhood forcibly removed from their bodies? I ask you to please contemplate this horror and atrocities, sir. The blood of Yosef Ishate, the 13-year-old boy killed in Waldia by the TPLF sniper on Saturday, January 20, 2018, when he was returning from the Epiphany celebration, is crying out to God from the ground. The blood of Osandala, the 15-year-old 7th grade student in Nakamt, shot dead on February 28, 2018 by TPLF soldiers, assassinated on the street, is crying out to God. The blood of innocent children who have been mutilated, whose innocence has been stolen. The blood of righteous people, people who will not cower to evil, is crying out to God. Mr. Ambassador, do you smell the thickness of the spilled blood of my people? Do you smell the blood in the air? Do you hear the blood-curdling scream of the prisoners being tortured for no good reason, only a few miles away from your office? Do you hear the agony of good men having their manhood forcibly removed from their bodies? I ask you to please contemplate this horror. I ask you to please listen with your soul. Mr. Ambassador, I'm sorry to see my government partnering and supporting a regime that commits such heinous crime against its own people. It needs to stop immediately and once for all. To be sure, America's national security is not guaranteed by partnering with regimes that terrorize their own people and deprive citizens of their God-given right to security. The question is not if the Ethiopian people will overthrow the TPLF government. They will undoubtedly remove the TPLF soon. However, the true question at the meat of the matter is, will the United States stand on the side of the oppressed, the tormented, or with their despotic tormentor? Will the US stand with the killer until it sees the victims become the killers in a sort of political Stockholm syndrome gone horribly wrong? Will the US watch and continue to provide military, economic, and intelligence support as the regime pits 81 of Ethiopia's ethnic groups against each other and create uncontrollable civil war? Will the US side with the people and help bring about peaceful transition, or support the TPLF regime until it's forcibly and violently dismantled, creating even more carnage? What is the long-term US interest in such a plan? An Ethiopia divided into several warring zones, like in Somalia? All I'm saying to you, Mr. Ambassador, is that change needs to happen now, and it must be actionable and sustainable. Hope is no longer good enough, and standing by and watching dictators harm innocent people is inexcusable and just as evil as perpetrating such crime against humanity. America, as the leader of the free world and the lifeline of peaceable global regime, should pressure the government of the TPLF to restore peace and security by removing its command posts and militarized secret police units from all regions. The government should also unconditionally stop politically motivated imprisonments and killings, harassments of civilians, fostering animosity and pitting communities against each other. It should release all political prisoners, journalists, and civil society activists unconditionally and immediately without question. This is the only way to make it right, insofar as we can replace a regime of terror with Xerxes. With the people in rebellion and the ruling party itself in disarray and the government discredited, the regime must realize that it's not in a position to manage the crisis by itself. That's why an international transitional agreement with the United States as the foremost partner is the most amenable choice for bringing about restorative order to Ethiopia. The US government, I believe, can and should convince the current government to agree to convene a national conference of all stakeholders, including political organizations and civic groups inside and outside of the country, and all those forced into exile. Everyone's voice deserves to be heard, especially after so many have been forcibly suppressed and oppressed. In conclusion, Your Excellency, I would like to leave you with this thought. As Mordecai said to Esther, maybe, just maybe, who knows if you've not come to Ethiopia for just a time as this. To paraphrase the word of Martin Luther King, in the end, the Ethiopian people will remember not the word of their enemies, but the silence of their friends. Thank you, Your Excellency. May God bless the United States of America. May God bless Ethiopia and the Ethiopian people.